That night, Natalie Williams stood silently at the window of her small apartment in downtown Boston, both hands clutching a ceramic mug, the rising steam fogging up her glasses. Snow fell quietly outside, blanketing rooftops and streets in a peace her heart could no longer feel. She had just ended the cruelest phone call of her life, a call with her parents, and one sentence echoed in her mind like a nail driven into her soul. If you won't help your brother get into medical school, then to us you're already dead. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She was silent. Silent like she used to be as a child, scolded without knowing why. Silent like when she came home with straight A's and was still asked, "Good. But why didn't you get a full scholarship like your brother?" Natalie was the eldest daughter of a middle-class family in Vermont. She once believed she was the pride of her family, smart, accepted into a prestigious university, financially independent from a young age, working as a software engineer at a top tech company. But everything changed when Daniel, her younger brother, got accepted into the most expensive medical school in the state. "We can't afford this," her mother said with a tone of blame. "You're making money, Natalie," her father added. "Your brother is the future of this family. He's going to be a doctor. You're just a programmer." That line struck straight to the heart. Natalie loved Daniel. Since they were kids, she carried him on her back, rocked him to sleep, walked him to school when he was afraid of the snow. But love doesn't mean unconditional sacrifice. "I have $60,000 saved to start my own business," she said, her voice trembling during the call. "If I give that to Daniel, all the plans I've built over the years will be gone. I can't trade my dreams for his." There was silence on the other end. Then her father's voice came through, colder than ever. "Then you are no longer our daughter." No one asked Natalie what she needed. No one asked how many years she had worked herself to the bone, skipping lunches to pay off student loans. They only saw the number in her bank account like a walking wallet. That night, Natalie quietly packed her things, cleared her inbox, changed her number, and rented a new apartment near Boston's tech hub. She quit her job to fully focus on launching a startup, beginning a completely new journey with a shrinking bank balance and a shattered heart. She named her project NeuroBloom, an app that helped children with autism communicate through simulated interactive scenarios. The idea came from a moment she'd never forgotten. At 17, Natalie volunteered to care for a 5-year-old boy with autism. He hadn't spoken a word for 3 weeks, but on the last day, when she created a simple ice cream shop simulation game on a computer, he whispered his first words. "You. Ice cream." Natalie had cried that day. And now she wanted to bring that little miracle to thousands of other children. But startups weren't like the movies. In the first month, she failed to raise funding. No one believed a young programmer with no medical degree could build something truly effective. She lived on instant noodles and cheap coffee. Her old laptop overheated so often that she had to place it on an ice tray after working 10 hours straight. She didn't call home. No one reached out to check on her. Her parents kept their word. To them, she was gone. 3 months later, while sitting exhausted in a hallway at a startup conference, Natalie was approached by an older woman. She had heard Natalie's pitch 15 minutes earlier. No flashy slides, no music, just a trembling voice and a story about the little boy who once said, "Ice cream." "Did you know?" the woman said. "I once lost a child because we didn't have early autism support. If your app had existed back then, maybe he'd still be alive." That woman was Jacqueline Ross, a seasoned angel investor who had backed dozens of education startups. She handed Natalie her card and said, "I don't know if you'll succeed, but you have something I believe in, not code but heart." Natalie received her first investment. Not much, just $25,000, but enough to rebuild the app, hire a speech therapy consultant, and begin trials at a specialized education center. Slowly, NeuroBloom found its first users. Then 10. Then a small feature in a healthcare blog about a new app for children with autism. She kept refining, responding, improving. Her eyes were sunken, her back hurt from endless hours at the screen, but she had never felt more alive. One night, she read a message from a mother. "My son said, 'Mom, for the first time thanks to your app.'" Natalie burst into tears. No one called her useless anymore. No one asked, "What about your brother?" There was only her walking a path she had chosen. even at the cost of rejection, heartbreak, and being erased from her family. Natalie knew no one could give back what she had lost. But now she was building something no one could ever take away. The following spring, Natalie sat in the tiny office she jokingly called NeuroBloom Mission Control. In reality, it was just a rented corner in the basement of an old library. The smell of damp paper and rotting would seep through every crack. But to her, it was the place where all the things no one believed in had begun to take shape. On the wall was a diagram of interactive modules, from lessons like recognizing emotions to simulated communication after rejection. Every detail had been carefully tested with speech therapists and parents who once sat helpless before the silent gazes of their children. Each week, she volunteered at a special education center, spending hours observing autistic children using her app. She recorded every tiny reaction, quick glances, finger movements, fleeting smiles to fine-tune the product. There were days Natalie was so exhausted, she fell asleep at her desk. She survived on simple meals: whole grain bread, soy milk, and watered-down coffee. Every time she passed a fancy restaurant, she looked inside and turned away, reminded of those family dinners that now only lived in memory. Her savings were running out. After the initial investment, she hadn't secured the next funding round. Some investors suggested pivoting the model into an entertainment app for kids, because it's a bigger market with better margins. Natalie refused. "I'm not here to sell fake smiles. I'm here to help a child speak their first word." Some laughed at her. But Jacqueline Ross, her original angel investor, didn't. She continued following Natalie's journey without interference or pressure, only sending her a brief message: do the right thing, not the easy one. By the end of the first year, NeuroBloom still hadn't turned a profit. Natalie even considered taking a night job to cover expenses. But then one day she received an email from a child psychologist in Texas. "Your app helped me discover a new approach to treating young patients. I've proposed NeuroBloom for a statewide pilot program. It still needs approval, but chances look very promising." Natalie read the email over and over, her hands trembling. After months of isolation, someone finally understood and acknowledged her effort. 3 months later, NeuroBloom was featured at a medical conference on special education technology. For the first time, Natalie stood before over 100 professionals, no longer the shaky girl from last year's startup fair. She presented her story honestly: the boy who said ice cream, why she refused to fund her brother's medical school, and the day her parents declared she was dead to them. The room fell completely silent when she said, "I chose to stand up for the children no one listened to, because I too was never truly heard." The presentation ended with a long round of applause. A few audience members stood, eyes glistening. Among them was a journalist from a prestigious medical journal. 2 weeks later, Natalie was on the cover of the Voices Changing the Future of Special Education feature. She could hardly believe her eyes when she saw the headline: "The daughter disowned in her journey to turn pain into hope for thousands of children." The news spread quickly. The NeuroBloom website crashed from traffic. Special education organizations from California, Colorado, Oregon all reached out. Some offered to license the app. Others invited her to train their staff. A major nonprofit pledged $200,000 to help her develop new modules. Natalie, once the girl living in a basement apartment, had become the founder of one of the fastest-growing early intervention platforms for autistic children in the country. But she never forgot where she started. She continued visiting the education center every week, sitting cross-legged on the floor, playing with the kids. She still journaled every night, not about app downloads, but about the look in a child's eyes when they said hello for the first time, or "I like this," or made eye contact. Every time, she whispered to herself, "We can all begin again. We don't need to be perfect, just honest enough." One late March afternoon, Natalie received an email from an event organizer in Vermont, her home state. They invited her as a guest of honor to speak at a ceremony recognizing women who had made a positive impact on the community. "We know you no longer live here, but what you've created has inspired thousands of families across the state. We want you to return not as a daughter, but as a game changer." Natalie stared at the words on the screen, hands frozen. Vermont, her hometown, where her parents still lived, where Daniel was once expected to become the family's future doctor. She didn't reply immediately. That night, she took a walk alone in Boston's gentle spring drizzle. The soft yellow glow of streetlights reflected on wet sidewalks. Each step seemed to awaken a memory. Her first day away from home. The day she was disowned. The moment she decided to believe in herself against every doubtful voice. And now an invitation to return. Not as a child, but as a symbol. The next morning, Natalie typed her response. I'll come. And I'll bring my truest story with me. In early April, Vermont still held on to bursts of unexpected cold, as if winter wasn't quite ready to leave. Natalie stepped off her domestic flight, carrying a small suitcase and a leather document bag. No one was waiting. No flowers, no welcome signs. But that was fine. She was used to arriving and leaving alone. It had been 2 years since she left this place. 2 years since her parents declared she was dead to them. And now she was returning not as a remorseful daughter, but as an honored guest speaker, the founder of NeuroBloom, a therapeutic platform now supporting over 30,000 children and families across the U.S. In the taxi to her hotel, Natalie gazed out the window at familiar roads, old diners, and the lakeside trees still bare. Part of her felt a connection, but a larger part felt hollow, as if her hometown had become an old house for which she no longer held a key. The award ceremony was held in the grand hall of her former high school, the very stage where Natalie had once stood to receive her senior honors. But this time was different. This time, the front row was filled with district leaders, journalists, special education advocates, and, stopping her heart for just a moment, her parents. They were seated there, almost unchanged. Her mother wore a green wool coat, eyes cast downward. Her father sat with arms crossed, glasses perched low. Neither looked her way. She reminded herself, I'm here for NeuroBloom, not for them. The host introduced the guests one by one. When it was Natalie's turn, thunderous applause echoed, but in her mind, she could only hear the sound of her name being spoken aloud. Please welcome Natalie Williams, founder of a groundbreaking therapy platform for children with autism. A woman once disowned by her family, but who has changed the future for thousands of children. She stepped onto the stage to applause. Her eyes scanned the front row. Her mother was now looking straight at her, lips pressed tight. Her father stared off to the side. But they were listening. And they were there. Natalie began her speech with a simple line. I'm not the perfect daughter. But maybe that's exactly why I had the guts to do something different. She spoke about building NeuroBloom, the sleepless nights, the meals of stale bread, the dream that began with a single child whispering the word, ice cream. She never mentioned her parents by name. But everyone in the room understood the weight behind her words. Some loved me when I brought home straight A's. But when I chose a different path, they called me a disappointment. I spent 2 years without a family, unacknowledged. And I used that very loneliness to build a place where rejected children could still be heard. The room was silent. A few people wiped away tears. I'm not standing here today because I succeeded. I'm standing here because I didn't give up on myself even when no one else stood by me. The speech ended in a standing ovation. Natalie bowed and stepped off stage, not feeling triumphant, but calm. Because the strange thing about reaching a high point is realizing how clearly you can see the emptiness beneath it. After the ceremony, she attended a small reception for honored guests. She chatted with former teachers, school board members. Everyone smiled, shook hands, praised her. But in the crowd, there were only 2 people she was searching for, and they were standing at the edge of the hallway, watching quietly. Natalie walked over. Her mother turned first, eyes glistening. You look so different, she said. Because I've lived differently, Natalie replied calmly. Her father said nothing, but looked at her for the first time in 2 years. His expression held surprise and a silence she couldn't name. Did you do all this because you were angry with us? He asked softly. No, she shook her head. I did it for the children. No one believed in the way no one believed in me. Her mother gently reached for her hand, a small gesture, but one that stirred waves of emotion. Would you give me a chance to talk to you properly? Natalie looked at that hand, the hand that had once wiped her forehead when she was sick, but also the hand that had hung up the phone without a word. She slowly withdrew her hand. Not today, Mom. Today, I'm not anyone's daughter. Today, I'm just myself. That night, back at the hotel, Natalie opened her laptop and saw a new email from Daniel. Sis, I don't know if you'll read this, but I'll write it anyway. I dropped out of med school over 6 months ago. Not because I hated it, but because I knew I wasn't doing it for me, I was doing it for our parents. I'm working part-time at a bookstore now. Life's modest, but I'm trying to find something that actually belongs to me. Today I saw you. Stronger. Brighter. But still the sister I remember. I'm sorry for the silence. For leaving you alone. I won't ask for forgiveness. I just want to say I'm proud of you. Daniel. Natalie sat motionless. For the first time in 2 years she allowed herself to cry. Not out of pain but from the weight finally lifting off her chest. She typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally she wrote only one sentence. Finding yourself, that's the most worthy thing of all. I hope you get there. The next morning she left Vermont. She didn't say goodbye to her parents but carried no bitterness either. She knew now. Some doors don't need to slam shut. They just need to be closed properly. And this time she closed that door with her own hand. Gently, but firmly. A few weeks after the Vermont recognition ceremony, Natalie returned to her usual rhythm in Boston. The NeuroBloom project continued to expand rapidly. An international special education organization in Sweden invited her to collaborate on a localized language version. A major tech company offered a 7-figure deal to acquire the platform. She turned it down without hesitation. For Natalie, NeuroBloom wasn't just a company. It was belief. It was the answer to countless nights where she questioned her worth after her own family refused to acknowledge her existence. Still, something had shifted in her since the ceremony. Not weakness but a deeper awareness. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come from others, it begins with yourself. One weekend morning while sorting documents her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated then answered. Hello. Natalie? A raspy woman's voice. Familiar yet distant. Yes, speaking. It's Mom. I know you might not want to hear from me, but I'm asking just a few minutes. Natalie went silent. Part of her wanted to hang up. But another part, the faint voice of an 8-year-old girl once longing for her mother's praise on her first drawing, kept her still. I'm listening. Her mother took a deep breath. Your father's been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 2. The doctors say he needs surgery soon. You owe us nothing, I know that. But I hope you'll come. Just once. Natalie tightened her grip on the phone. Her chest ached not from pain, but from the realization that she wasn't ready to see her father fragile. She made no promises. Just nodded, though her mother couldn't see it. 3 days later, she boarded an early train to Vermont. No fanfare, no award. Just a woman with a bag and a baseball cap, stepping into a small provincial hospital unsure of what to expect from her past. A single hospital room, dim light. Her father was asleep. His face sunken, hair mostly gray. Hands once strong, now frail and bony. On the table sat some medicine, an old prayer book, and a faded photo, the three of them, when Natalie was 10. Her mother rose when she entered. No hugs. No tears. Just words. Thank you for coming. Natalie sat down, her hands resting on her coat. You didn't tell Dad I'd be here. No. I didn't dare. He's still too proud. But I know he misses you. By the afternoon her father stirred. His eyes landed on Natalie, no shock, no anger. Just a long look. Then he turned away and quietly asked, Your mother called you here, didn't she?
No, Natalie replied.
I came for myself. A brief silence. The heart monitor beeped steadily in the background. You've changed, he said. Because no one held me back the way they used to. He let out a quiet, somber chuckle. Sometimes I thought if only you were an obedient child, life would have been easier. But I wasn't born to make life easier for others, Dad. I was born to be myself. Her father closed his eyes. Her mother turned away to dab her eyes with a tissue. For the first time, Natalie felt no need to prove anything anymore. No need for apologies. Only presence. She stayed by his side all afternoon. They read together. Made small talk. No one mentioned the past, but no one avoided it either. Each word felt like a careful stitch mending something long broken. Before leaving the hospital, her father called out, "Natalie, could you leave a hug behind?" She froze. In all those years, he had never spoken such a vulnerable thing. She stepped forward and leaned in. He placed his hand on her back light, almost like breath. But in that moment, she felt the anger, the harsh words, and the 2 years of silence melt into something warm. That night, she sat in the kitchen with her mother, the same one where Sunday dinners once happened. The kitchen was old now, but the dishes were in the same spots, and the blue floral tablecloth was still in use. "You kept this?" Natalie asked, running her fingers along the edge. "I couldn't throw it out," her mother replied. "Just like I couldn't stop looking to your chair after every meal even when it was empty." Natalie smiled softly, though her eyes stung. Her mother reached out and held her hand. "I was wrong to ask you to give up who you were for anyone else. I thought if Daniel became a doctor you'd feel proud. But I forgot you needed to feel proud of yourself too." "You realized late," Natalie said without resentment. "But I did realize. And I want to make it right." The next morning, Natalie chose not to stay. She needed to return to her work. But before leaving, she left a letter on the kitchen table. "To Mom and Dad. I'm not coming back to be the perfect daughter you once wanted. I can't and I won't. But I'm willing to re-enter your lives if this time I get to be fully myself. I don't need to be flawless. I just want to be loved even if I'm different." On the train ride back to Boston, Natalie sat by the window. Beside her was her laptop, open to a proposal to expand NeuroBloom into Canada. But her eyes weren't on the screen. She was thinking of Daniel. And just then, her phone buzzed a new message from him. "Sis, I've started drawing again comics. I remember how you used to read Super Max to me. I think I want to create my own superhero. I tried to become a doctor because I thought it was the only way to help people. But you showed me, there are so many other ways. I'm done apologizing, I'd rather show you through action. One day I'll make you proud. Not by doing what you did, but by doing what's mine. Daniel." Natalie looked out the window. Soft sunlight streamed through the clouds. Not the harsh kind, but the kind gentle and warm enough to let something once withered start to grow again. A week after returning to Boston, Natalie received a thick cream-colored envelope, bearing her mother's familiar handwriting. Inside were a few old photographs, yellowed childhood snapshots. Young Natalie hugging Daniel in a garden of white daisies. Natalie with her first bike, grinning wide, scraped knees on display. Tucked in with them was a short handwritten letter. "I don't know if we can start over. But if we can, I want to begin by learning how to love you unconditionally." Natalie folded the letter and looked up at the whiteboard on her wall, where she had once written the very first motto for NeuroBloom. "Listen not just with your ears, but with the belief that the person in front of you deserves to be understood." She sat at her desk, pen in hand, intending to continue outlining her expansion plans. But her thoughts drifted toward a question that had long lingered, a question never spoken aloud, but always simmering beneath the surface. What if I hadn't succeeded? If NeuroBloom had failed? If she was still just a regular software engineer in a cramped apartment? If she had remained the girl who refused to pay for her brother's tuition? Would her parents have forgiven her? Would Daniel have sent that message? Would anyone who turned away have ever come back to say, "You still matter, even if you're not a hero"? The question didn't come from regret, but from a quiet fear. Is human worth always measured by achievement? That evening she called Daniel. He answered after 3 rings. "Hey sis," he said, voice soft as breath. "How are you?"
"I'm okay," Natalie replied.
"And you?" "Doing all right. I just applied to be a teaching assistant for an art class for kids with disabilities." The teacher was the only one who didn't laugh when I said I left med school. There was a brief pause. Then Natalie asked, "Daniel, if I were still just a regular engineer living alone without recognition, without NeuroBloom, would you have sent me that apology?" The question fell like a stone into still water, sending slow, widening ripples. Daniel didn't answer right away. Then he sighed. "Honestly, maybe not. Maybe I would have waited for a good enough reason to get over my pride. I'm sorry for that." Natalie closed her eyes. Not angry. Not surprised. Just affirmed in something she had quietly suspected. But, Daniel added, there's something you don't know. Before your recognition, I saw a Neurobloom video shared in a friend's support group. I saw an autistic child smile for the first time while using your app. And in that moment I knew, no matter who you are, whether you're famous or not, you're someone I deeply admire. It's just, he said quietly, I didn't have the courage to say it until you were officially recognized. Natalie didn't reply, but her heart sank. Not from disappointment, but from understanding. People often wait until you prove yourself to show respect. And that was deeply sad. The next day, she hosted an online talk called The Invisible Ones. It was a series of stories from people who had been written out of their own lives. For not fitting the mold, not achieving early, not pursuing prestigious careers, not living up to family expectations. Natalie opened with a single question. Would you still love someone if they never became anything more than simply themselves? Thousands tuned in live. Many cried as she recounted being disowned. Even more resonated when she admitted, I once feared that my worth depended on my grades, my job, my success. She ended with a sentence that left the audience in complete silence. My family welcomed me back. Not because I was Natalie, but because I had become someone.
I'm grateful.
But I also know, if love depends on success, then it isn't real love. So I chose to love myself, before waiting for anyone else to do it. The following week, her mother sent a small parcel. No letter, just a wooden photo frame. Inside was a drawing Natalie had made at age 11. A girl reading under a tree. Next to the scribbled caption, one day, I'll do something for the kids no one understands. On the back of the frame was a note, handwritten. You don't need to do anything. Just being you is what I'm proud of. That evening, Natalie sat in her quiet apartment, placing the frame beside her laptop on the desk. The warm glow of her lamp lit the edges of the drawing in a golden hue. Button, the little dog she'd adopted, lay curled at her feet, fast asleep. She looked back on everything she had endured. From the girl who was told she was dead to her parents, to the founder of a platform that changed the lives of thousands of children. But perhaps the greatest thing she had done wasn't building Neurobloom. It was surviving with a heart that didn't harden, forgiving without losing boundaries, and loving herself even when no one else did. At the end of her journal entry that night, she wrote, I'm no longer afraid of being left behind, because as long as I don't abandon myself, no one can truly hurt me forever. I may not be the perfect daughter, but I am a kind person, and that is enough. One early summer morning, as soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, Natalie woke earlier than usual. Birds chirped outside the balcony. The scent of coffee drifted quietly from the automatic brewer in the kitchen. She stood before the mirror, gently brushing her tousled hair. No makeup, no blazer, no packed schedule, just an ordinary day. And the miracle was, she felt enough. She didn't need to be on stage. Didn't need her name in an article. Didn't need credentials, or anyone's validation. After everything, Natalie had found what she once longed for. Peace in being herself without needing permission. At the Neurobloom office, she hung a new wooden frame on the wall. Inside it was a question that had once made her choke up. If I don't succeed, who am I? Beneath it, in her own handwriting, she had written the answer. I am a kind person with or without achievements. She also began a small new project called Rooted, a storytelling platform for those pushed to the margins of traditional success. Not celebrities, not award winners, just survivors of grief, of family silence, of the crushing weight of expectation. In the very first recording of Rooted, Natalie sat across from a middle-aged woman whose hair had gone prematurely gray after losing her son in an accident. The husband's family had blamed her, cut all ties. Have you forgiven them? Natalie asked. The woman stared into the distance, then smiled. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's wrapping the pain up, putting it on a shelf. So there's room left to keep living. Natalie nodded. That sentence wrapped itself around her, gentle, yet powerful enough to open a door inside her. In early July, Daniel visited her in Boston for the first time in 3 years. He brought the draft of his first comic about a superhero who couldn't speak, but saved lives with just a glance. I named it Silent Light, Daniel said. Like you. You don't need noise to change something. Natalie smiled, flipping through the pages. You know, she said, I used to believe I only mattered if I proved something. But now I know love doesn't need conditions. If it requires achievement to be accepted, it's not love. Daniel went quiet for a while, then whispered, Thank you for not turning your heart to stone. That night, the two of them sat on the balcony, sipping tea as the city lights came on. Below them, Button, her little dog, slept curled up like a small ember. Daniel spoke, voice low. I think Mom and Dad are starting to understand. Not because you succeeded, but because they finally see that you dared to live true. Natalie shook her head gently. It doesn't matter what caused their understanding. What matters is that it's real, and that they no longer expect me to return as the daughter they once tried to mold. Daniel turned to her. Have you forgiven them? Yes, Natalie said. But I'm not becoming the old Natalie again. I don't live to prove anything. I don't live to make up for anything. I live to be whole. A few weeks later, Natalie's father underwent a successful surgery. In a follow-up phone call, he said to her, I still don't fully understand your life, but I'm learning not to control it. Natalie responded, gently but firmly, I don't need you to understand everything. I just need you to let me be me. In August, Neurobloom held its first major expansion conference not in Boston, but in Vermont. Natalie sat on stage alongside parents, experts, and even young adults who had once used the platform as children. A boy once diagnosed as nonverbal stepped onto the stage and said 3 words. Thank you, miss. Natalie wept unashamedly. In the applause that followed, she looked into the crowd, her mother wiping tears, her father clapping slowly, nodding. Nothing more needed to be said. After the conference, a young reporter interviewed her. What do you consider your greatest accomplishment so far? Natalie paused, then smiled. Not Neurobloom. Not Rooted. It's that I still have a soft heart after all the pain. The reporter blinked, then nodded. I think that's something very few people manage. On her last night in Vermont, Natalie and Daniel visited their old house, the one where she had once been shut out of family dinners. Now laughter echoed through it again. Not because everything was healed, but because everyone had accepted to live with the broken parts. Her mother said, We can't erase the things we said or the hurt we caused. But I want you to know, no one here wishes for the perfect Natalie to come back. Because the Natalie you are now is the one I'm most proud of. On the flight back to Boston, Natalie wrote in her journal, I once believed I was only accepted if I succeeded. But the truth is, I don't need acceptance if it comes at the cost of who I am. I may not be the daughter my parents once wished for, but I am the daughter I needed to become. And that is enough. One crisp autumn afternoon, she walked with Button through the park. Children played nearby. Leaves floated lazily onto the sidewalks. Someone recognized her, offered a soft smile and a polite wave. Natalie smiled back.
No introductions.
No mention of Neurobloom. Because at last she had become what she had always dreamed of. Not a doctor, not a founder, not a model daughter. But a free human being who knows how to love herself. No matter what others try to define her as.